Hello everyone, it's 7 o'clock. With Omicron cases surging across the country, multiple NHS trusts in England have declared major incidents because of staff shortages. And the Royal College of Nursing has called for the government to take a more cautious approach on restrictions. There are concerns about what could happen with children going back to school today and the return to work after the Christmas and New Year holiday. We're going to speak to the Vaccine Minister, Maggie Throup, the Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, as well as the NHS providers, Chris Hobson. Also this morning, we'll chat to the chair of the government's Vaccine Advisory Committee and the director of the Oxford Vaccine Group, Professor Sir Andrew Pollard. Exactly a year since the AstraZeneca jab was first rolled out. Plus, and the music medic who went from DJing in his scrubs in the kitchen to opening London's New Year's Day parade and supporting Fatboy Slim. We'll speak to NHS doctor DJ Kishan Badalia at around 9:30. It's Tuesday, the 4th of January. As many as 6 NHS trusts declare critical incidents as nurse leaders tell the government the NHS can ill afford the level of staff shortages caused by Omicron. Back to school and back to masks. Secondary school pupils in England will wear face coverings in classrooms as they head back today.
I'm live here at Victoria Station in central London, where the Omicron variant is beginning to have a real impact on staffing levels for rail companies.
Plus, Decision Day, the civil lawsuit against Prince Andrew over allegations of sexual assault reaches a crucial moment in a New York court today.
6K. One remains, and that is Peter Wright.
Starting the new year in the right way, the Scot Peter Wright takes home the Darts World Championship title for the second time. Hello, good morning. Multiple NHS trusts across England have declared critical incidents because of staff shortages caused by the spread of the new Omicron variant. The Royal College of Nursing has written to the Health Secretary saying that the NHS can ill afford the current level of absences and urging a more cautious approach to restrictions. And the concerns go beyond the NHS, with more than 1 million Britons in self-isolation as children go back to work and school after the Christmas holidays. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Tamara, who's here with me in the studio. A lot of pressure on the government, isn't there? With the pressure from the NHS and the fact that these critical incidents have been declared at a number of trusts, plus all of the children going back to school in the next day or so.
Absolutely, and it feels that the pressure, unlike previous waves, is not because of huge numbers of patients going to hospital, although that is ticking up all the time, but because of the sheer pressure of staff shortages, doctors and nurses being off with COVID, people in social care being off with COVID so patients can't be discharged, and of course increasingly teachers being off with COVID, meaning children are being risk being sent home from schools as soon as they get back. We're now seeing hospitals declaring critical incidents. We understand there are around half a dozen who have declared them internally because of staff shortages taking out 1 in 10, we think, across the board, but in some trusts, huge whole wards being taken out by people having COVID. And so that's where the pressure is coming from. Now, Boris Johnson made very clear yesterday when he appeared at a vaccine centre, he didn't expect to introduce more restrictions in England this week. The Cabinet are meeting tomorrow, and we expect they're going to continue with Plan B, which is working from home, mandatory masks on public transport and indoors, but not any more than that, not going as far as Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have. The Royal College of Nurses are now saying they should go further, but for so far the government are holding firm and saying that despite the pressure on hospitals, they hope things can continue as they are. We'll need to see whether all that mixing over Christmas, the impact of schools going back, makes a difference in the coming weeks.
OK, well, we'll put some of those points now to Maggie Throup. She is the Parliamentary Understate for Vaccine and Public Health, Vaccines Minister. Good to talk to you today, Maggie Throup. Let's just start with getting some of the facts as how they've emerged over Christmas and New Year. How many Britons are currently in self-isolation?
I'm not sure of that actual figure, but I think what's shown over Christmas is that a lot of people have caught the disease. The Omicron variant is very transmissible. But what is good news, it doesn't seem to be resulting in severe disease as some of the other variants did. So that is really good news. And obviously, people were taking precautions over Christmas, and I'd like to thank them for that.
You are the Minister for Public Health. Surely you should know how many people are in self-isolation.
Well, not everybody declares that they're self-isolating. I think that's one important thing, that it's something that they do because they've tested positive or they've been in contact with somebody who's tested positive. They don't have to report that in. But I think what has been so clear over recent weeks is that the vaccine is working, and that's the best way to stop the transmission and to stop hospitalisations and for our life to get back to normal.
But in terms of how we're going to manage the NHS in coming days, in terms of how we're going to manage schools and even workplaces, how can the government do that if it doesn't know how many people are self-isolating? When we know the latest figures about positive tests, for example, but, over 1 million positive tests, that means the people that they know, the people that they live with, will also have to self-isolate, doesn't it? So we could be looking at 4 or 5 million people, potentially, or even more. You just don't know.
Well, I think the important thing is that we are looking at the data all the time with regards to hospitalisations, as you say, people who have actually tested positive, and also the number of people in the high dependency units as well. I think at the moment, if you look at people who have been hospitalised, then they are going in with less severe conditions than before, and the numbers that are in hospital beds is about half what it was a year ago. And that just shows the power of the vaccine. And my message today is, if you haven't come forward for your booster yet, come forward. If you haven't had your first dose of vaccine or delayed your second dose, there's always a chance to come forward to get those life-saving vaccines. It's never too late, and that offer is always open.
Well, we'll come on to the NHS in a moment, but on the subject of vaccines, there are around 2 million booster appointments that have yet been taken. We know that a lot of booster centres were even open on Christmas Day. Is this that people are not bothering to get their booster, or have they got a booked appointment and they've then gone to a walk-in centre and got it separately? Why do you think there are so many appointments that are being missed for boosters?
I'm not sure about it's being missed, but we did open up the National Booking Service so people could come along and get a vaccine when they book the vaccine, or the walk-in centres as well. And they were hugely popular before Christmas. And so many people took up that offer. Over 34 million people.
There are 2 million vaccine appointments available this week. You're desperate for people to get vaccines. Why are there all these appointments available?
Well, it's quite right that we have those opportunities there for people to come forward to get their booster. It'd be wrong of us if we shut down the National Booking Service and just expected people to go into walk-ins. So it's quite right that offer is there for people to book their vaccine, whether it's their booster dose or, as I said, their first dose or second dose. That offer is always open, and it's quite right that across the country people can make their appointments and come forward for their vaccine.
But in terms of numbers, only 100,000 were boosted yesterday, so the numbers have really declined, haven't they?
I think we've just been through 2 weekends of bank holiday, and I think that's quite clear that numbers will change as we move forward. And what was really incredible is the number of people coming forward on Christmas Day, and even on the bank holidays, we had more people coming forward on the bank holidays than other bank holidays in the past. So people have really taken the vaccine programme to heart, and it's probably the most successful vaccine programme that the NHS has ever run, and probably one of the most successful across the whole world as well. And I want to thank everybody for playing their part, whether it's the NHS, the thousands, in fact millions of volunteers that have really helped made a difference, and people coming forward to get that life-saving vaccine in such a timely way.
Nevertheless, we're seeing critical incidents at a number of hospitals. How many exactly? We think about half a dozen NHS trusts have had critical incidents because of staff shortages. How many exactly, do you know?
I think the critical incidents are announced and then they can be very short-term ones. And it's saying to the other trusts around, can we have some extra help? Can we have some mutual aid? Sometimes it's just a matter of hours that the critical incident's in place for. Other times it's longer. But it's actually reaching out to the wider NHS to say, we have got a problem in this particular area. And it is sometimes quite geographical as well. And for different reasons. It could be staff shortages. It could be other reasons. So it's quite right.
But do you know how many we're at this morning, for example? I know, as you say, it is fast moving, but, what are the latest figures from this morning?
Well, it is fast moving. That's why it'd be wrong of me to actually say a number, because quite shortly there could be another one, or another trust could actually say, no, we're back on track now and we're okay. And it's a mechanism that's been put in place in the past. And I'm sure.
Sorry to cut across you, but is it wrong for you to say? I mean, we wouldn't want you to mislead, but it strikes me that perhaps you just don't know.
To be honest, I haven't had an update this morning. As we know, the Lincolnshire Hospital Trust declared one yesterday, and others have declared them in the past. And I think, as I've said, it can be very short-lived, and it can be longer as well. But it's for different reasons. Sometimes it's staff shortages, sometimes it's bed capacity. It's a complete mixture, and it's quite right.
You're the Minister for Vaccines and Public Health. You're the Minister for Vaccines and Public Health. The government has put you up today to talk to us about COVID, to talk about the pressure on the NHS and to reflect on the last 12 months of the AstraZeneca vaccine. But surely in that case, you should know how many NHS trusts are in critical measures at the moment, and indeed how many people in the UK are self-isolating. They seem to be really key bits of data that the public want to know. They want to know how many people are self-isolating. They want to know if their local hospital trust is in a critical condition or not. Does the government have a handle on this?
It definitely does. And obviously there's meetings on a on a daily basis with the key people within NHS England, and there'll be an update later on that situation. But as I've said, the best thing to do to help to protect the NHS and to make sure that other major infrastructure can continue is for people to come forward for their vaccines. As you say, it's actually just a year today since the Brian Pinker had that first Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine out of clinical trials, and that's a real good milestone, and it's an amazing achievement for British research and innovation that since then over 50 million of those doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine have been put into arms in the UK, and 2.5 billion doses across the world have been administered of that particular vaccine, and it's testament to the work that's gone on within the UK.
Absolutely, and nobody wants to take away from that. But equally, we also have to look at the current situation as we have it now, not the situation over the last 12 months. And the Royal College of Nursing have called on Sajid Javid to work with counterparts across government for a more cautious approach in England. The RCN's also said it's concerned about the fact that there are different regulations in different parts of the UK nations. We're hearing about pressure on maternity departments. We know that some hospitals in the north are now not allowing visitors again. It does seem that the messaging that's coming from the health service is that the government needs to be doing more. Is the government listening? Is the government prepared to bring in more restrictions?
Look, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, that we have got Plan B, which is people working from home, the COVID pass, face coverings, and obviously the vaccine programme, which is so important. And
these are all important, but if they're not working, if we have 6 trusts in critical measures, then it suggests that the Plan B possibly isn't as effective as it might be, and that do we need to be looking at Plan C?
The Plan B is working. As you can see from the number of hospitalisations, it's far fewer than this time last year. And that's so important as well, that the vaccines are working, the measures for people to work from home are working, and people are being really compliant. It's really good news that people want to do their part to make sure that we get this virus under control. And the Prime Minister said that Plan B is working. There'll be a cabinet meeting today, and I don't see any reason why we need to change. It's important that we do follow the data. We've done that all along, and we'll continue to do that. And people are playing their part, and I want to thank them for that.
You're talking about the vaccines and how important they are. Why are we then selling off a UK vaccine development centre near Oxford, the Vaccine Manufacturing and Innovation Centre? I mean, that doesn't seem like great confidence boost, does it, that if we are selling off these facilities as soon as they appear successful?
Well, I wouldn't want to comment on the commercial decision, but I think what is important that we've got good supply of vaccines. We've got the Pfizer, the Moderna, AstraZeneca, and others coming online as well. And it's important that people do come forward for the first vaccines and the second one as well. That offer is always open, and I think what was really encouraging as well was as the booster programme was turbocharged, more people came forward for their first dose as well. I think they've seen just how important it is. They've seen other people get the vaccine, and they've also sadly heard the people say that they've been seriously ill because they haven't had the vaccine. And to put that message out that vaccines are important, they do save people from getting serious disease, and they do save lives.
Yeah, despite that, we still have 6 trusts and critical incidents. Maggie Throup, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Vaccines and Public Health, thank you very much.
Thank you, thanks.
Well, let's take a look now at the latest COVID data. 157,758 new cases were reported in England and Scotland in the latest 24-hour period. 42 deaths were recorded in England, bringing the total number of deaths within 28 days of a positive test across the UK to 148,893. Well, those high numbers of Omicron cases is also impacting the railways, with staff forced to isolate and train services in turn being cancelled. Sky's Enda Brady joins me now from Victoria Station in central London. Hi, Enda. So you've managed to avoid COVID all over Christmas. You've not seen necessarily all your nearest and dearest. You're back to work today, and then you find out the trains don't work.
Yes, the train companies are really struggling, all because of COVID and the rise of the Omicron variant. So it's having a huge impact on staffing levels. The information I have is that staff absences running at 9.9% across the industry over the past 2 weeks of the festive season. So touching 10% of staff out. Omicron is having a massive impact, and the end result is train companies are having to collapse their timetables, run reduced schedules. There are some short-term cancellations in place as well. Now, we've spoken to the Rail Delivery Group, and they say to just bear with the train companies. They're doing their best. They're putting in place measures that are designed to give people some sort of, access and confidence in the system. They're urging people to get online so they can see what trains are being cancelled. But here at London Victoria, it is probably the quietest I've ever seen it in this week of the year. There's hardly anyone inside. Very few trains running. Southern Rail have stopped all of their services in and out of London Victoria until the 10th of January, and that is as a direct result of staff absences. So the Gatwick Express, for example, not running from here either. So a very tricky period for the rail industry. Staff absences now running at 9.9%.
Tricky indeed. Enda, thanks very much. Well, later in the programme, we're going to talk to the Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, about today's return to school. And at 8:05 this morning, we'll talk to the government's chair of the Vaccine Advisory Committee and director of the Oxford Vaccine Group, Professor Sir Andrew Pollard, as we mark 1 year since the AstraZeneca jab was first rolled out. And then ahead at 8:30, I'm going to talk to the Chief Executive of the NHS providers and also a COVID-19 intensive care unit anaesthetist about the current staffing pressures on the health service. Lawyers for Prince Andrew will today call on a judge in the US to throw out the sexual assault case he's facing. The case has been brought by Virginia Giuffre, and a legal document made public yesterday shows that she entered into a settlement agreement with Jeffrey Epstein, which the Duke of York's lawyers claim also covers him. It's up to the judge to decide whether he should be immune from liability. Sky's Joe Pike reports now from New York.
Among Prince Andrew's close friends, a child sex trafficker and a prolific paedophile. The Duke of York travelled on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet, and Mr Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were invited to Balmoral and Windsor Castle. But it's the accusation Prince Andrew sexually assaulted Virginia Giuffre 3 times when she was 17 years old that is at the heart of this case. He denies wrongdoing.
He knows exactly what he's done, and I hope he comes clean about it. Thank you.
The secret document shows Jeffrey Epstein paid Virginia Giuffre $500,000 in a 2009 settlement. there is no mention of Prince Andrew. However, it includes a clause which says Virginia Giuffre does release, acquit, satisfy and discharge any other potential defendants from all manner of action. Now, this is the clause which Prince Andrew's lawyers are likely to argue means the whole case should now be thrown out. Virginia Giuffre's team say this document is irrelevant, and the fact that the prince isn't even mentioned means he's not covered by it. Ultimately, it's up to the judge to decide if this case should go ahead. But if it does, expect a full civil trial in the autumn. In civil cases, parties usually settle before that happens. But some legal experts think one of the parties in this case may be loath to do that.
Virginia is already a multimillionaire because she was able to settle against Epstein's estate. So there's less pressure on her to take a settlement and make the case disappear. She's not as needy as she might have been several years ago. In that sense, this is the sort of case where Virginia herself and her lawyers might say to Prince Andrew, we don't care how much you pay. We're not settling. We want the truth to be told. We want to have a trial.
The next hearing in this case takes place later today, tarnishing the start of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee year and raising further questions about the judgment of the man said to be her favourite son. Joe Pike, Sky News, New York.
Meanwhile, one of America's most high-profile investigators is demanding that Donald Trump and his two eldest children give evidence in an investigation into his business empire. New York's Attorney General issued the subpoena. The former president's lawyer called it a political witch hunt. The Trump family has asked the court to stop the action. Our US correspondent Greg Milam has more.
It's certainly the most significant moment in an investigation that's gone on for 3 years now. This subpoena for Donald Trump and two of his children by the Attorney General would ask for them to be interviewed under oath. And of course, Donald Jr. and Ivanka were key to the running of the Trump organization, particularly when their father was in the White House. The indication is they won't comply with this subpoena, so the chance they could be held in contempt of court. So there's a long way to go in this. The central allegation that this investigation is looking at is this claim that the Trump organization would inflate the value of its properties and its assets when it was trying to borrow money against them, and then deflate those values when they were filling in the tax return. It is a civil case, lots of documents handed over already. We know there's been this battle over Donald Trump's personal tax return. That's part of it as well. There is a criminal case too. The Trump organization has denied these allegations. In fact, they filed a lawsuit to stop this investigation from going ahead. They say it's politically motivated. They've called it a witch hunt, which of course is familiar because aside from the business, there's all the politics. And this is the week when America will look back on January the 6th last year and that attack on Congress, and Donald Trump planning to hold a news conference on the anniversary on Thursday to put his side once again of that story. So a new year, but familiar old themes for Donald Trump.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news this morning. And the founder of a failed Silicon Valley startup that promised to revolutionise healthcare has been found guilty of fraud in California. Prosecutors argued that Theranos' founder, Elizabeth Holmes, lied to investors by claiming that her company's technology could detect diseases from just a few drops of blood. Well, the former billionaire denied the charges, but now faces up to 80 years in prison. The Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, has been admitted to hospital with what is thought to be an intestinal obstruction, which could require surgery, according to his medical team. The hospital said his condition is improving. The Brazilian's been hospitalised several times for similar problems since being stabbed in the abdomen during a campaign rally in 2018. Charities are calling on the government to open more safe routes to people seeking asylum in the UK after data showed the number of people making dangerous journeys across the Channel in flimsy inflatable boats trebled last year. More than 28,300 people were known to have crossed the Channel in 2021, according to the Press Association news agency. Private parking companies are handing out an average of more than 22,000 tickets every day to drivers. Analysis of government data shows 4 million tickets were issued to British motorists between April and September, despite a reduction in cars on the road due to the pandemic. And it's been a festive 3 weeks at the World Darts Championships. Fans have turned up at Alexandra Palace in London in fancy dress and good voice, ready to party. And it all came to a noisy and exciting climax last night as Peter Wright took home the title in a thrilling final against Michael Smith. Sky's Kamali Melbourne reports.
One remains, and that is Peter Wright. Peter Wright is the champion of the world for the second time.
This is the moment that Peter Wright claimed glory in front of hundreds of fanatical fans at the new home of darts, Alexandra Palace in London. The world number 2, known to his fans as Snakebite, bested his rival bully boy Michael Smith to claim his second title.
It's not about me, it's about the future of darts, and this man, he let me in today. I just love him bits, and I feel so bad because I know as soon as he gets a major, he will just trounce everybody, and he will.
The 51-year-old Scotsman with the mohawk and snake tattoo joins Phil Taylor, John Part, Adrian Lewis, Gary Anderson and Michael van Gerwen as a multiple title holder. An emotional end to 3 weeks of competition. Time now for wife Joanne, the new trophy and the £500,000 prize money.
We're going to be speaking to Peter Wright before the end of the show, hopefully, so stay tuned for that. Right, let's get a quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
A stiff northerly wind will make it cold today. It's mostly clear, dry and cold now with icy stretches in the north, but there are wintry showers near north-facing coasts. Southern England, more general patchy rain. Cloud and rain, mostly clear from the northwest during the morning.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, if you think it's chilly out there, take a look at this. A winter storm brought heavy snow to Washington, D.C., affecting everyone from the president to also some pandas, apparently. Show us the pandas. There they are. Yeah, love a panda. It's almost camouflaged if it stands very still next to the tree. Around 10 inches of snow was forecast, which closed schools, government offices and even grounded the president's helicopter as he left Air Force One, returning to Washington after a week in Delaware. But some appeared to enjoy the weather. These pandas are at the Smithsonian Zoo, and they did seem quite happy, don't they, wandering across the frozen ground. I'm sure they've still got some bamboo. Now, coming up, the latest as schools across the country head back to the classroom with new COVID-19 measures in place. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News Breakfast, where we're talking a lot about Omicron and schools and the health service this morning. Let's bring in Tamara Cohen, our political correspondent, who's with me now. We spoke to the vaccines minister, one of the vaccines ministers, earlier in the programme. Wasn't able to give us a lot of answers about the numbers of infection across the UK.
That's right. So we know that there are well over 100,000 positive tests a day at the moment, but that's been a bit disrupted over Christmas with some parts of the UK not reporting them, and they could, of course, be far higher with people not getting tested. The vaccines minister couldn't tell us how many people might be in isolation. Of course, it looks like it's probably over 1 million if everybody who's got it is in isolation for at least 7 days. Their contacts no longer need to isolate unless they're unvaccinated, in which case they do. So how high it is, she couldn't tell us. The government are working on the basis of potentially a fifth or a quarter of staff being off with COVID in the coming weeks when they look at the NHS and schools. But this is what Maggie Throup told us earlier.
I'm not sure of that actual figure, but I think what's shown over Christmas is that a lot of people have caught the disease. The Omicron variant is very transmissible. But what is good news, it doesn't seem to be resulting in severe disease as some of the other variants did.
Do you know how many we're at this morning, for example? I know, as you say, it is fast moving, but, what are the latest figures from this morning?
Well, it is fast-moving. That's why it'd be wrong of me to actually say a number, because quite shortly there could be another one, or another trust could actually say, no, we're back on track now and we're OK. And it's a mechanism that's been put in place in the past. And I'm sure.
Sorry, sorry to cut across you, but is it wrong for you to say? I mean, we wouldn't want you to mislead, but it strikes me that perhaps you just don't know.
To be honest, I haven't had an update this morning. As we know, the Lincolnshire Hospital Trust declared one yesterday, and others have declared them in the past. And I think, as I've said, it can be very short-lived.
Well, of course, many questions for the education world as well. The Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union, Mary Bowstead, joins me now. In terms of the advice that teachers and schools have been given from the government, is it clear enough?
Well, it is clear. The advice is clear. The problem is it was issued 3 days ago, and it's I simply don't understand why advice which schools have to adopt needs to be issued so late. It's yet another case of the government just being last minute about guidance, which it could easily have issued earlier to give schools more time to prepare. But the advice is clear. Children will, if you're a secondary school pupil, you'll be taking 2 lateral flow tests this week. You will be required to wear masks in the corridors and in classrooms. And so that advice is clear. We would also say that the vaccination rate for secondary pupils is less than half pupils have had their first dose. And that is another important measure in order to keep COVID suppression as low as possible, the suppression of the transmission of the virus as low as possible in schools.
How well equipped are schools to deal with absences? We don't know what level absences may be, but what impact do you think it could have?
Well, I think it could be significant. In December, that's the latest month for which we have figures, 8% of education staff were absent because of COVID. And that was with a mixture of Delta and Omicron, so a less potent mix for transmission. I think that with Omicron, with the fact, particularly in primary schools, where in December, primary pupils were the age group which had the highest rates of infection, I think that, that there is a possibility that staff will become sick. And education staff are more likely than any other profession to catch the virus. 37%, according to the Office for National Statistics, more likely to catch COVID. So if they do that and they have to be at home, then there will be the issue about who will be taking classes. And that's a real problem, because we know the one thing that we want to happen is for schools to be open and children and young people to be educated in school, because that's the best place for them. So it is a shame that the government hasn't done more to ensure that that is going to happen.
Are schools facing pushback from pupils over masks? I mean, I'm imagining a lot of teenagers will have spent a large part of the last couple of weeks not wearing a mask in daily life, and they're now having to go back to wearing them day in, day out. Are there a lot of arguments in classrooms about these things?
I'm not hearing that. I mean, they're used to wearing them. Secondary school pupils are used to wearing them in corridors and in, communal places. In Wales and Scotland, they've never stopped wearing masks throughout the day. So, no, I'm not hearing that there's widespread revolt against that. I think that most teenagers are sensible, are quite resilient, and understand that this is a measure that is necessary. The mental health effects of not being in school are far greater than wearing a mask. If wearing a mask is a price to pay for staying in school, continuing to be educated, continuing to be learning with your friends, continuing to socialise, continuing to have a place to go. If you've got free school meals, continue to get that free school meal. If you've got worries and troubles in your life, having the school as a place where you've got people to talk to who will be able to help you. All those things, all the benefits of being in school and schools remaining open are far greater than the disadvantage of wearing a mask. The two just don't compute.
OK, Dr Mary Bowstead, the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, let's cross to our correspondent, Becky Cottrell, who is at a secondary school in Sheffield for us. Is she there?
Yeah,
hope so. I can hear her. I just can't see her. Becky, tell us what they're getting up to there. What are they doing in terms of pre-testing for the kids coming back?
Yeah, today obviously is the day they test children before they return to the classroom tomorrow. There's around 1,000 children that need to be tested today. I don't know if you can see me yet or just hear me, but there are testing bays set up ready for that. It takes about an hour to work through each year group, and that's why they need all day to do it. Now, the head teacher told me that they were prepared for this. They knew before they broke up for Christmas that they would have to test on site today, and they've got a mixture of staff and then specially trained testers that have been brought in to help. He also told me that supply of tests is pretty good. Obviously, there have been national shortages of tests, but at this school, they've got enough not only to do the tests on site today, but then to give kids those tests to take home. Obviously, children now have to do tests twice weekly at home. Another new thing nationally today, as I'm sure you've been talking about, is the wearing of masks in the classroom for secondary school students. Now, here they'd already been doing that. That was something that was brought in across the Sheffield region before Christmas, so children know what they're in for, and those measures will be in place until at least the 26th of January. Now, another thing that I asked the head teacher about is staff shortages. He said, thankfully, they've only had a couple of support staff call in sick, saying they have to isolate. But obviously, the concern here and for countries across the country is that as the children return, cases could rise, and that could take out a lot of teachers. Now, this school is ready and willing to merge classes if necessary, but I asked the head teacher about the idea of bringing in supply staff or getting retired teachers to return, and he said, look, it's really hard to get hold of supply staff at the moment, and the idea of retired teachers returning just isn't that realistic.
OK, Becky, thanks very much. Glad that we could see you eventually. And let's talk now to a head teacher of a school in Rotherham to see how that all fits in with what his experience is. Pepe Diazio, lovely to talk to you today, Mr Diazio. How do you feel about schools coming back today and the kids coming back? Do you feel optimistic or are you a bit worried?
I think as a head teacher, we're born to be optimistic. I think the phrase that we're using at the moment is that we are hoping for the best and planning for the worst. So the unknowns, as people have said earlier in your show, are around the number of cases that we'll meet this morning. And what we've got to do is make sure that we're ready with a number of different plans to make sure that staff are prepared to help cover other classes that may not have their colleagues in them, so that we can keep students in their classes this next term.
What's your latest knowledge about teachers? Do you have a clear idea of how many teachers are coming in and how many can't?
Well, I have to say it's better than it was in November and December. We've had just 2 colleagues ring in this morning who tested positively last night, and so we're aware that they won't be in for the next 7 days at least. We were facing absences of around 9 or 10% in December, and so that was definitely something that we struggled with. We had colleagues who were taking multiple classes together in large areas, such as the main hall. What we're hoping for over the next few weeks is that we don't see those sort of numbers away. However, what we do know is that this is something that's beyond our control at the moment.
That's really positive, isn't it? If it has really seemed to have got better for you, at least up to now. I don't want to jinx things. You were talking about teaching children in larger groups. Is that really a workable solution in the long term? Because some people have suggested, the Department for Education suggested that can work, but other people have said it can become a bit Mad Max-like if you're teaching huge numbers of teenagers altogether.
Yeah, I don't think it's a long-term solution, but I think it's a better solution than moving to virtual learning and remote learning. I think for a short-term basis, if you can have a specialist science teacher who's a senior and experienced teacher taking perhaps 2 or 3 groups of up to 40 or 50 students in a larger space, it does mean you've got to adapt your curriculum. But one of the plans that we have in place is to do just those adaptations to make sure that we can cover for those eventualities should they occur.
And what about things like masks, access to masks and access to these ventilation units that the government was talking about at the weekend? Are you happy that you've got all the equipment you need?
I wouldn't say that we're happy. I understand that there are 7,000 air purifying units that are available. As I understand it, there are something like over 300,000 classrooms across the country that would benefit from having those units. I'm sure that over the coming weeks, I'm sat here today in an office with my windows open. The weather's quite pleasant here in Yorkshire today. However, in the coming weeks, it's going to get colder. And I know that our staff and our students would benefit from having better air purifying units, and we're going to need more than the 7,000 that have been initially ordered from the DfE.
And in terms of mask wearing, Mary Bousted, we just spoke to from National Education Union, said she'd not heard anything about teenagers objecting to wearing masks in schools. What's been your experience? Have they all been pretty compliant?
Yeah, we've had maths all through the autumn term. The addition today, as we come back, is that they'll be wearing of masks during the classroom sessions as well. It's not great for learning, particularly in language lessons, for example, where students need to speak more often. It certainly isn't great for teachers who need to have their voices and faces seen a lot as part of their teaching of a lesson. But it's one of those things that I think the whole country is becoming used to, and it's just part of the daily life in schools at the moment, really.
Does it have any impact on behaviour? Are they more mischievous when they're able to hide behind a mask, perhaps? Or again, is that not really borne out?
Well, no, I do think it is. We read so much from people's faces, and so that is an integral part of being a teacher. And it is more difficult to understand what a student is thinking, or anyone is thinking, with a mask on. But what I will say is that students understand the importance of keeping each other safe. Many of them have got family and relatives who are shielding at home. And what we've seen is that students really want to help support the community and make sure that they help keep our community safe.
And I suppose in terms of being at school and being with their friends, it's in their interests as well, isn't it, for this to work for everybody?
Absolutely. I mean, if you talk to our students, that they will say that they hated lockdown, that the biggest part of lockdown for them and COVID was missing their friends and not having the opportunity to socialise. The school days are the best days of our lives, and our students want to make sure that they're here and enjoying school. And part of that will be the return to school today. We're testing over 600 students today, and there'll be our senior students in school, and the younger students will return over the next couple of days. And I know that many of them can't wait to be back here, and we'll love seeing them again.
And in terms of what more the government could be doing, if the government ministers were watching on at the moment and you have a wish list, what would you ask them to do to make the next few weeks smooth for you and your pupils?
Well, we've been promised a review at the end of the month around mask wearing, and what I would ask is that we'd welcome earlier notification of any plans. To hear these plans in the Sunday papers as we did this weekend certainly wasn't something we'd welcome, and I think all head teachers would prefer to have more lead-in time so that they can plan for what's happening over the coming weeks. What the government are doing right now, with the exception of the extra air purifying units, is certainly a welcome step forward compared to where we were last year.
Pepe Diazio, head teacher at the Wales High School in Rotherham. Lovely to talk to you this morning. Best of luck getting them all back today. Hope all those shoes have been shined and those curls and fringes tamed. Thanks a lot, including yourself. Now, let's take a look at this story. 15 minutes was all it took for these twins in California to be born in different years. Alfredo was delivered on New Year's Eve at 11:45, while his sister Aylin was born at midnight on New Year's Day. Do we know which was which? Aylin weighed 5 pounds 14 ounces. Her big brother, Alfredo, maybe he's the one on the left, weighed 6 pounds 1 ounce. I'm just guessing, though, who knows. Lovely story, though. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast. Lawyers for Prince Andrew will today call on a US judge to throw out the sexual assault case against him. We'll have the very latest. Prince Andrew's lawyers will today call on a US judge to throw out the sexual assault case brought against him by Virginia Giuffre. Well, a legal document made public yesterday shows that Ms Giuffre entered into a settlement agreement with Jeffrey Epstein. The Prince's lawyers claim that it covers the Duke of York too. Well, with me now is the legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg. And Joshua, lovely to talk to you this morning. Happy New Year. This settlement dates back to 2009, doesn't it? And it basically says that she must not take further legal action. But the big question is, of course, does this include Prince Andrew? What are your thoughts today?
That's the question for the judge today, isn't it? Now, this deal worth $500,000 signed in 2009, in that Virginia Giuffre said that she promised to release, acquit, satisfy and forever discharge not just Jeffrey Epstein, but any other person or entity who could have been included as a potential defendant from all actions, claims, variances, trespasses, damages, judgments, executions, demands whatsoever in law and equity. And this is the best bit, from the beginning of the world to the day of this release, which was in 2009. So this was a very, very broad document. Now, does it apply to Prince Andrew? Was he a potential defendant? Well, he is a defendant now, so presumably he was covered by Exhibit A, this document that you're looking at now. On the other hand, he wasn't referred to by name in the agreement. His lawyers say he was a third-party beneficiary. And normally, third parties can't enforce the terms of a contract if they receive only incidental benefits from it, but he's entitled to do so if he's an intended third-party benefit. It didn't refer to him by name. That's what's pointed out by Virginia Giuffre's lawyers. But on the other hand, her original claim against Epstein said that she was required to be sexually exploited by Epstein's adult male peers, including royalty. So it's on that basis that the prince's lawyers argue that he's covered by this agreement.
So if the judge decides that he is covered by this agreement, is that the end for Ms Giuffre, that there is no more potential of legal action?
I'm sure there's a possibility. Yes, I'm sure there's always an appeal, isn't there, and another chance. But yes, it's an important point. Of course, on the other hand, if that argument is thrown out, well, the Duke of York has got other arguments. He says it can't be heard in New York because she lives in Australia. She was above the age of consent under New York law at the time. Even the legislation under which he was allowed to bring the claim against him, it temporarily reopened the statute of limitations, extended the time limit. They say that's unconstitutional. So there are lots of arguments on both sides as to whether the claim should be allowed to go to a hearing later this year if it gets that far, or should be thrown out straight away.
If the hearing were to be allowed to go ahead, and it's scheduled for sort of September, possibly at the earliest, would Prince Andrew have to attend?
If the hearing goes ahead, then it would be difficult for him to argue his case unless he was willing to give evidence. But I've always thought that this case would settle at some point, and I regard these arguments that we're hearing today and we'll be hearing in the future as skirmishes to enable the two sides to be able to assess and assert their relative strengths. This is a civil case. Any civil case can be settled. The original case that was brought against Jeffrey Epstein was settled. The question is obviously how much money, and that depends on the strengths of the two sides and how much they both want to settle. So it would be interesting to see whether there is going to be a hearing later this year. But obviously, if there isn't a deal, then that's what will happen.
And in terms of this civil case, how affected will it have been by the judgment and the verdict in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, which happened just after Christmas?
It doesn't have a direct impact on this, does it? But on the other hand, it does show, you've seen the famous photograph, obviously, of the Duke of York, of Virginia Giuffre, and of Ghislaine Maxwell together at her flat in London. And the fact that she is now a convicted defendant, that's the photograph there, the convicted defendant and is facing a long prison sentence, doesn't really help his position, does it? But it doesn't directly affect the case against him. He was referred to in passing in the criminal proceedings against Ghislaine Maxwell, but he wasn't directly involved in it. And neither, of course, was Virginia Giuffre. She was not called to give evidence, which may or may not be seen as significant.
Nonetheless, this is all extremely damaging for the Prince's reputation, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, it doesn't look very attractive, does it, to take advantage of a deal when Prince Andrew wasn't directly involved. He certainly didn't contribute to the $500,000 that Epstein paid Giuffre. So it's taking advantage, perhaps, of a deal that his then friend, no longer obviously a friend even before he killed himself, that his then friend reached. So in terms of publicity, in terms of his reputation, it doesn't do much for him. But obviously, if you're fighting a legal battle, you use all the tools at your disposal.
Indeed. Joshua Rosenberg, good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Let's get a quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, a stiff northerly wind will make it feel really cold today. It's mostly clear, dry and cold now, with icy stretches in the north, but there are wintry showers near north-facing coasts. Southern England has more general patchy rain. Cloud and rain there will mostly clear from the northwest during the morning, but will linger over southeast England. Elsewhere, mostly dry and sunny.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come at the top of the hour on Sky News Breakfast, with more than 1 million Britons in self-isolation and 6 NHS trusts declaring critical incidents. We'll have more on the impact of Omicron.